The blizzard hit Snake Ridge like God's own fury, turning the mountain pass into a white hell. Sarah pressed her face against the frosted window of Murphy's trading post, watching the snow devour the landscape. Behind her, the last of the miners huddled around the potbelly stove, their voices a low rumble of worry. She'd been stranded here 3 days now, her stagecoach money spent, her belly empty, and her pride worn to nothing. "Another whiskey, boys?" she asked, forcing brightness into her voice. The tips had been scarce. Nobody had money to spare for a waitress when they were all trapped and running low on supplies themselves. Before you continue with Sarah's journey, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It truly means everything to us and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. Where are you listening from today? The door burst open with such force that ice crystals exploded inward like shattered diamonds. Every head turned. The figure that filled the doorway was more mountain than man. 6'4" of raw muscle, wrapped in a bearskin coat, his dark beard crusted with ice, his gray eyes scanning the room with the wariness of a wolf. "Kieran Frost," Murphy breathed from behind the bar. "Thought you were dead." "Not yet." The mountain man's voice was gravel and smoke. He moved to the bar, and Sarah noticed he favored his left leg. "Whiskey, the bottle." She grabbed the bottle with shaking hands and set it before him. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his weathered face, the way his massive shoulders hunched with pain. When he reached for the bottle, she saw his hands, those enormous, capable hands, trembling. "You're hurt," she said, before she could stop herself. Those gray eyes fixed on her, cold as the storm outside. "I'll live." But he wouldn't. Sarah had seen enough death in her 23 years to recognize it stalking a man. She'd watched her mother fade from fever, her father from a bullet, her husband from a mine collapse that had left her with nothing but debts and a ticket west to nowhere. Kieran Frost drank straight from the bottle, and Sarah watched the color not return to his face. When he stood to leave, he swayed, catching himself on the bar with a grunt of pain. "You can't go back out there," she said. "My horse got to tend to him." Each word seemed to cost him. "Where is he?" "Lean-to behind the post." Sarah grabbed her thin shawl, all she had, and pushed past him into the screaming wind. The cold hit her like a fist, stealing her breath, but she fought her way around the building. In the crude shelter, she found the most magnificent stallion she'd ever seen, black as midnight, steam rising from his flanks. He was shivering, his head hanging low. She ran her hands over him, checking for injuries, feeling the unnatural heat beneath his coat. Fever. The horse had a fever, and in this cold, that meant death. When she stumbled back inside, Kieran had collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. "Your horse is sick," she said. "He's burning up." The mountain man's head snapped up, and for the first time, she saw raw fear in those granite eyes. "Shadow? If that's his name, yes. He needs to be cooled down, but carefully. The fever." Kieran tried to stand and nearly fell. Sarah caught him, her small frame somehow steadying his massive one. He was burning up too, she realized with a start. Man and horse, both struck by the same illness. "Let me put my hand on him. He's cold," she said, though it was a lie. "Let me help him. You can barely stand." "He won't let strangers touch him." "Then come with me. Lean on me." Something shifted in Kieran's face. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of respect. He let her guide him back into the storm. Let this slip of a waitress support 240 pounds of dying mountain man. In the lean-to, Shadow nickered weakly. Kieran's knees buckled, and he went down hard beside his horse, his big hand finding the stallion's neck. Easy, boy, easy. Sarah knelt beside them both. I need snow, clean snow, and blankets. Can Murphy spare blankets? Take what you need, Murphy's voice came from the doorway. Kieran Frost saved my boy from a grizzly 2 winters back. I owe him my life. For the next 3 hours, Sarah worked. She packed snow around Shadow's legs to draw down the fever, covered his body with every blanket Murphy could find, forced water mixed with willow bark tea down his throat. Kieran slumped against the wall, watching through half-closed eyes, too weak to do more than murmur encouragement to his horse. Why? He finally asked. You don't know me, don't know Shadow. Sarah sat back on her heels, her hands numb, her dress soaked through. My husband had a horse, red mare named Dahlia. When he died in the mine, his debts took everything. They took Dahlia too, sold her to a man who beat animals. She met his eyes. I couldn't save her, but I can save Shadow. Something cracked in Kieran's expression. Your husband, recent? 8 months. And you're here alone, waiting tables. Better than starving. Better than... She couldn't finish. Better than accepting the offers men had made. Offers that would have put a roof over her head at the cost of everything that made her who she was. Kieran's jaw tightened. No woman should have to choose between starving and worse. By dawn, Shadow's fever had broken. The stallion lifted his head, his eyes clearer, and pressed his nose against Sarah's shoulder in unmistakable gratitude. Kieran watched this with wonder. He's never done that. Not with anyone but me. Sarah stroked Shadow's muzzle, tears she didn't know she'd been holding spilling down her cheeks. He knows I love him. Come back to my cabin, Kieran said abruptly. I need someone to tend the place, cook, keep things running. The pay is room, board, and $10 a month. She turned to him, searching his fever-bright eyes. I'm not... I know what you're not, he cut her off, his voice gentle despite its roughness. I'm asking you to work. Nothing else. Ever. Not unless you wanted it, and I don't expect you ever would. Why would you help me? Kieran looked at Shadow, then back at her. Gold isn't what I need. Labor isn't what I need. He held her gaze. I see a woman worth saving, just like you saw a horse worth saving. Fair trade, seems to me. The cabin sat high on the mountain, surrounded by pines that stood like sentinels against the sky. It was larger than Sarah expected. 4 rooms, well built, with a stone fireplace that could heat the whole space. Kieran showed her to a small bedroom with a real bed, a luxury she hadn't known in months. This was my sister's room, he said. She married a doctor in Denver, left 3 years back. You're alone up here? Mostly. He swayed, catching himself on the doorframe. The ride up had cost him dearly. Get in bed, Sarah ordered. You're burning up worse than Shadow was. For a moment, she thought he'd argue. Then he nodded and moved to what must be his room. She heard the creak of the bed frame, the rustle of blankets. Sarah found the kitchen well stocked. She built up the fire, put water on to boil, made the same willow bark tea she'd used on Shadow. When she brought it to Kieran's room, she found him sprawled across the bed, fully clothed, shivering despite the sweat on his brow. You have to undress, she said, trying to keep her voice clinical. You'll never break the fever in wet clothes. You don't have to. I've seen men before. I was married. But her hand shook as she helped him out of his shirt. His body was a map of survival. Scars from bear claws, from bullets, from knives. His chest and arms were massive with muscle earned through hard labor, not vanity. She tried not to think about the strength in those arms, the gentleness in those hands when he touched Shadow. She got him down to his pants and under the blankets, then spent the night as she'd spent the previous one, fighting fever with snow and water and prayers. Kieran thrashed, calling out names Sarah didn't know, reliving battles and losses in his delirium. Once, he grabbed her wrist with frightening strength. "Emma," he gasped. "Emma, I'm sorry." "Shh," Sarah soothed, stroking his sweat-soaked hair. "It's all right. You're safe." By morning, his fever broke. She woke slumped in the chair beside his bed, her neck aching, to find him watching her with clear eyes. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed." Emma didn't. The words were raw. "My wife, 5 years ago, said she couldn't take the loneliness anymore. Took our daughter back east. Annulled the marriage." Sarah's heart cracked. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She was right. This life. He looked at the window, at the endless mountains beyond. It's no life for most people. Hard, lonely, dangerous. That's more than most people can claim. Something shifted in his eyes. Recognition. Maybe. Understanding. The days fell into a rhythm. Sarah cooked and cleaned, learning the patterns of the cabin, of the mountain. Kieran taught her to shoot, his big hands steadying hers on the rifle. His voice patient as he explained windage and drop. "Every woman in the territories should know how to protect herself," he said. He taught her to ride Shadow, the stallion accepting her with unusual grace. He taught her to track deer, to read weather in the clouds, to find water in the driest season. And slowly, meal by meal, lesson by lesson, she learned his story. Kieran Frost had been a cavalry scout, then a lawman, then a guide. He'd seen the worst of men and the best. He'd killed when he had to and saved lives when he could. He'd built this cabin with his own hands, planning a life with Emma and their daughter Grace. When they left, he'd stayed, unable to leave the only home he'd ever made that meant anything. "Do you hate her?" Sarah asked one evening, as they sat by the fire, the work done, the comfortable silence between them stretching warm. "No," Kieran said after a long moment. "I understand her. This mountain, this silence, it's healing for me. It was killing for her." He looked at Sarah. "What about you? Your husband?" Tom was a good man, kind, but he was reckless, always chasing the next big strike, the next fortune. It got him killed. She stared into the flames. "I loved him, but I was also afraid for him. Every day he went into those mines, I thought it might be the last time I'd see him. And then it was." "You blame yourself." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "I should have stopped him. Should have insisted we leave, find another way." Kieran's hand covered hers, rough and warm. "You can't save people from themselves, Sarah. Believe me, I've tried. Emma made her choice. Tom made his. All you can do is respect that and keep living." The touch of his hand sent something through her, not just attraction, though God knew he was beautiful in his rough way, but something deeper. Safety, understanding, home. She pulled her hand back, frightened by the feeling. "It's late. I should stay," he said it softly. "Just stay. Talk to me a while longer." So she did. They talked until the fire burned low and the moon rose full over the mountains. They talked about loss and hope, about the violence of the frontier and the beauty that survived anyway. And when Sarah finally went to bed, she lay awake thinking about the way Kieran looked at her. Like she was worth seeing, worth knowing, worth keeping safe. Spring came slowly to the mountain. Ice gave way to rushing water, snow to wildflowers. Sarah had been at the cabin 3 months, and she'd changed. Her hands had calluses now. Her arms were stronger. Her aim was true. She could ride Shadow as well as Kieran could, track game, defend herself. But more than that, she'd changed inside. The fear that had lived in her chest since Tom's death, since the lean months after, since those terrible offers from terrible men. It was fading. In its place grew something she'd thought lost forever. Peace. Kieran changed too. He smiled more, laughed sometimes at her terrible jokes, touched her casually, a hand on her shoulder when he passed, fingers brushing hers when he handed her tools. Every touch felt like fire. One afternoon, teaching her to throw a knife, he stood behind her, his chest against her back, his arms bracketing hers as he guided the blade. "Release is everything," he murmured, his breath warm on her neck. "You hold too tight. You'll never let go. But trust yourself, trust the weapon, and it'll fly true." Sarah released. The knife buried itself in the tree trunk dead center. "Perfect," Kieran said, but he didn't step back. Neither did she. "Kieran," she whispered. "Tell me to move away," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me and I will. I'll never touch you again if that's what you want." She turned in his arms, looking up at his weathered face, those storm-gray eyes. "What if I don't want you to move away?" His hands came up to frame her face with such tenderness it made her ache. "I'm not easy, Sarah. I'm rough and I'm broken, and I don't know if I remember how to be gentle." "I don't need gentle," she said. "I need real." He kissed her then, and it was everything. Hunger and hope, desire and desperation. The meeting of two people who'd both been lost and found each other in the wilderness. His hands were steady on her, demanding nothing, offering everything. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he said. "Maybe already fallen. Thought you should know." "Good," Sarah said, "because I'm falling too. Have been since you let me save Shadow." They didn't rush. That night, and many nights after, they sat by the fire, kissing, talking, learning each other. Kieran told her about the scars on his body, the wounds on his soul. Sarah told him about her dreams, about the life she'd wanted before the world took it away. "You can have those dreams," Kieran said, "here, with me, if you want." "I want," she whispered. But peace never lasts long in the territories. The riders came on a Thursday in late April. Sarah was in the garden, coaxing vegetables from the mountain soil, when she heard Shadow's warning whinny. She looked up to see 4 men on horseback, their faces hard, their hands too close to their guns. The leader was fat and cruel-faced, his eyes crawling over Sarah in a way that made her skin feel dirty. "Well now," he drawled, "what's a pretty thing like you doing all the way up here?" Sarah stood slowly, her hand moving toward the knife at her belt. "This is private property. You're not welcome." "Ain't you feisty?" He dismounted, his companions following. "See, we got business with Kieran Frost. Heard he's been hiding up here like a coward." "There's no coward here," Sarah said coldly. "Just a man who's done with people like you." "People like us?" the leader laughed. "Sweetheart, Kieran Frost killed my brother, shot him dead in Deadwood 2 years back. I'm here to return the favor. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Get off this mountain. Make me. The knife was in her hand before he finished speaking, its point at his throat before he could draw his gun. His companions froze. I've gotten good at throwing these, Sarah said softly. Want to bet I can put one through your eye before your friends can draw? You're bluffing. Try me. The standoff broke when Kieran stepped out of the cabin, his rifle leveled. She's not bluffing, Garrett. Sarah's got a steadier hand than me these days. Garrett Moss's face twisted with rage. Kieran Frost, you son of a bitch. Your brother drew first, Kieran said calmly. He was beating a saloon girl near to death. I gave him a choice, stop or face justice. He chose to pull his gun. You murdered him. I stopped him from murdering someone weaker. If you'd been there, I'd have stopped you too. Moss lunged for his gun. The mountain exploded with sound. Kieran's rifle, the crack of pistols, Sarah diving for cover. She came up throwing, her knife finding its mark in one gunman's shoulder. Kieran's shot took another in the leg, but Moss had circled around, his gun aimed at Kieran's back. Sarah saw it happening as if in slow motion. Moss's finger tightening on the trigger. Kieran turning, but too slow, too late. She threw herself forward, slamming into Moss's arm as the gun fired. The bullet meant for Kieran's spine took her in the side instead. A white-hot lance of agony that drove her to her knees. Kieran's roar shook the mountain. He was on Moss in seconds, his fists brutal, efficient, ending it. The other riders fled, dragging their wounded with them, leaving Moss unconscious in the dirt. Then Kieran was kneeling beside Sarah, his hands shaking as they pressed against her bleeding side. No, no, Sarah. Why? Couldn't let him shoot you, she gasped. The pain was enormous, stealing her breath, her vision graying at the edges. You're not dying, Kieran said fiercely. You hear me? You're not dying. He carried her inside, laid her on his bed, worked with the steady hands of a man who'd treated battlefield wounds. The bullet had passed through clean, missing anything vital, but the blood loss was serious. Sarah drifted, pain and shock pulling her under. She surfaced to find Kieran's hands on her, stitching, bandaging, his face carved from stone. Go slow, she whispered when he moved her to check the exit wound. It hurts. His hands gentled immediately. I'll die before I hurt you, he said, his voice breaking. I'll die before I let you be hurt again. Not dying, she managed. Too stubborn. Something like a laugh escaped him, or maybe a sob. Yeah, you are. She healed slowly. Kieran barely left her side those first days, sleeping in the chair by the bed, tending her wounds with infinite care. Shadow came to her window, nickering softly, as if checking on her. You saved my life, Kieran said one evening, when she was finally strong enough to sit up. You saved mine first, Sarah pointed out. Seems fair. Nothing about this is fair. He took her hand, his thumb stroking her palm. I dragged you into my past. My enemies are mine now too, she interrupted. That's what happens when you love someone, Kieran. Their fights become your fights. You love me. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. With everything I am. He kissed her then, carefully, mindful of her injuries. Marry me, he said against her lips. Not because you work for me, or because you saved me. Marry me because I can't imagine breathing without you. Because you're the strongest person I've ever met. Because when I look at you, I see home. Sarah's tears spilled over. Yes, God, yes. They married in the meadow below the cabin, when the wildflowers were at their peak. Murphy came up from the trading post to officiate, bringing half the people from the settlement as witnesses. Shadow stood beside Kieran like a best man, and Sarah wore wildflowers in her hair. The vows were simple, traditional, but when Kieran slipped the ring on her finger, his mother's ring, kept safe all these years, he added words of his own. "You're not property, Sarah Frost. You're not something to be owned or controlled. You're my partner, my equal, my love. Together we'll face whatever comes." Together, Sarah echoed, the word a promise, a benediction, a prayer. The first week of marriage passed like a dream. Sarah woke each morning to find Kieran watching her, those gray eyes soft with wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. They fell into new rhythms, working side by side during the day, falling into each other's arms at night, learning the geography of intimacy with patience and passion. But the wilderness doesn't care about honeymoons. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in early July. Sarah was hanging laundry when she noticed Shadow acting strange, his ears pinned back, his nostrils flaring. She followed his gaze down the mountain trail and saw the dust cloud rising. Riders, at least a dozen of them, coming fast. "Kieran!" she called, already moving toward the cabin. He emerged with his rifle, his face hardening as he saw the approaching group. "Get inside. Bar the door." "I'm not hiding while—" "Sarah." He turned to her, his hand cupping her face. "Please, I need to know you're safe. I can't think straight if I'm worried about you." She wanted to argue, but she saw the fear beneath his determination. She kissed him hard and fast. "Don't you dare die on me, Kieran Frost." "Wouldn't dream of it, Mrs. Frost." But these riders weren't enemies. They were led by Marshal Tom Blackwood, a grizzled lawman Kieran knew from his scouting days. Behind him rode miners, ranchers, townspeople from 3 different settlements. "Frost," Blackwood called out, "need your help. Renegades hit Silver Creek 2 days ago. Took 4 women, 3 children. Trail leads north into the high country." Kieran's jaw tightened. Sarah emerged from the cabin despite his orders, standing beside him. "How many renegades?" 15, maybe 20. They're armed and they know the mountains. We need a tracker. We need you." Sarah's hand found Kieran's. She knew what this would cost him, leaving her alone, riding into danger, risking the life they'd just begun building. But she also knew who he was, a man who saved people, a man who stood between the innocent and those who'd harm them. "Go," she said quietly. "I'll be fine." "Sarah, those children need you more than I do right now." She squeezed his hand. "I can shoot. I can hunt. Shadow will protect me. Go save them." Something blazed in Kieran's eyes, love and pride and gratitude all mixed together. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. 2 weeks, 3 at most. You see any trouble? You ride to Murphy's. Promise me." "I promise." She watched him ride away with the posse, his broad shoulders straight, his rifle across his saddle. Shadow whinnied after them, restless, and Sarah stroked his neck. "It's just you and me, boy," she said. "Let's show him we can handle it." The first few days were fine. Sarah kept busy, tending the garden, hunting small game, maintaining the cabin. She practiced her shooting, her tracking, all the skills Kieran had taught her. The mountain was beautiful in summer, alive with birdsong and wildflowers. But on the 4th night, Shadow woke her with a warning nicker. Sarah grabbed her rifle and moved to the window, her heart pounding. In the moonlight, she saw them, 3 men creeping toward the cabin, their movements furtive, predatory. Not renegades. These were opportunists who'd heard about the woman alone on the mountain. She didn't give them a chance to get close. She fired a warning shot over their heads, then chambered another round with a loud, deliberate click. "Next one goes through flesh," she called out. "You've got 10 seconds to get off my property." One of them laughed. "Come on, sweetheart. Don't be like that. We just want some company. Some hospitality." Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. She remembered Kieran's words. Every woman in the territories should know how to protect herself. She remembered her own vow. She would never be helpless again. 5 seconds, she said, her voice cold as winter ice. They didn't believe her. The leader started toward the door. Sarah aimed low and fired, her bullet kicking up dirt inches from his feet. The man yelped and jumped back. "Next one takes your kneecap," Sarah promised. "Then your friends, then the third man's. I've got plenty of ammunition and all night." This time they believed her. They backed away, hands raised, disappearing into the darkness. But Sarah didn't sleep the rest of that night. She sat in the rocking chair by the window, rifle across her lap, waiting for dawn. When morning came, she found their tracks. They'd circled the cabin twice more before finally leaving. The message was clear. They'd be back. Sarah made a decision. She couldn't ride to Murphy's. That would mean abandoning the cabin, everything she and Kieran had built. But she couldn't defend the place alone against determined attackers either. She needed help, and she knew where to find it. 2 hours later, she rode Shadow down a trail Kieran had shown her once, pointing out landmarks. "There's a Lakota camp in the valley beyond those peaks," he'd said. "They're peaceful. They know me. If you ever need help and I'm not here, you can trust them." The camp appeared as the sun reached its peak, a circle of teepees beside a clear stream, horses grazing nearby. Sarah's approach was noticed immediately. Warriors emerged, their faces unreadable, their hands on their weapons. Sarah dismounted slowly, keeping her hands visible. She'd learned enough Lakota from Kieran to manage a greeting. "I come in peace. I am the wife of Kieran Frost. He calls you friends." An older man stepped forward, his long gray hair braided with beads, his face weathered but kind. "Kieran Frost is known to us. He helped us when soldiers would have driven us from this valley. You are his woman?" "His wife. I'm Sarah. I am Running Bear." He studied her with sharp eyes. "You come alone. Where is Kieran?" "Riding with a posse, rescuing captives. I stayed to protect our home, but last night men came, bad men. They'll come back with more." Running Bear's expression hardened. He spoke rapidly in Lakota to the others, then turned back to Sarah. "This is not right. You should not face this alone. We will help. I don't want to bring trouble to your people. Kieran Frost brought no trouble when he defended us. We bring no trouble now. This is what friends do." He smiled slightly. "Besides, my daughter has spoken of you. She would be angry with me if I did not help." A young woman emerged from one of the tippies. She couldn't have been more than 18, beautiful with long black hair and quick, intelligent eyes. "I am Wakian. My father speaks truly. Kieran Frost is a good man. Any wife of his is sister to me." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She'd been so alone, so frightened, and now here were people offering help without hesitation. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Running Bear organized a plan. 4 warriors would come back to the cabin with Sarah, hidden positions in the trees around the property. When the men returned, and they would return, they'd find a much different welcome than expected. Wakian insisted on coming too. You need another woman, she said practically. For propriety, if nothing else, and I'm good with a bow. The trap was set that evening. Sarah stayed visible in the cabin, moving about her normal routine, appearing vulnerable and alone. But in the trees, 5 sets of eyes watched. 5 warriors waited. The men came as predicted, just after sunset. This time, there were 5 of them, emboldened by numbers. They approached openly, confident. The leader, the same one from before, knocked on the door with mock politeness. "Hello in there. We've come to talk. Peaceful-like." Sarah opened the door a crack, her rifle hidden behind it. "You're not welcome here. Now, that's not friendly. We just want—" He never finished. Running Bear's voice rang out from the darkness, speaking English for their benefit. "You want to die? Keep walking toward that door." The men spun, searching the shadows, their hands on their guns. Moonlight glinted off arrowheads aimed at their hearts. "You're surrounded," Sarah said calmly. "Drop your weapons, all of them, or you'll have Lakota arrows in you before you can draw." The men looked at each other, calculating odds, finding them poor. One by one, their guns hit the dirt. "Now leave," Sarah continued. "Spread the word. This mountain is protected. Anyone who comes here with ill intent won't leave alive. Understand?" They understood. They ran, stumbling over themselves in their haste to escape. Running Bear emerged from the shadows, a small smile on his face. "You have the spirit of a warrior, Sarah Frost." "I have the spirit of a woman protecting her home," Sarah corrected. "But I'm grateful for warriors as friends." The Lakota stayed 3 more days, making sure no other threats emerged. In that time, Sarah and Wakian became close. The younger woman taught Sarah beadwork, shared stories of her people, laughed at Sarah's terrible attempts at Lakota pronunciation. "You and Kieran," Wakian said one evening as they worked side by side. "You love him truly. I see it in your eyes when you speak his name." "I do," Sarah admitted. "More than I thought possible. Does that seem foolish? We've known each other such a short time." "Time means nothing. My mother knew my father 1 day before she agreed to marry him. They had 40 years together before she passed to the spirit world." Wakian's smile was soft. "Love is not about time. It is about recognition, seeing in another what your soul has been seeking. That's beautiful. That's truth." When Running Bear and his warriors finally left, Sarah felt different. Stronger, more connected to this land and its people. She wasn't just Kieran's wife anymore. She was part of something larger, a community that transcended settlement boundaries, a network of people who helped each other survive. Kieran returned on the 10th day, riding up the trail with exhaustion carved into every line of his body. Sarah saw him coming and ran, throwing herself into his arms before he could even dismount. "You're alive," she sobbed into his neck. "You're alive and you're home." "I'm home," he agreed, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "God, Sarah, I missed you. Every minute I missed you." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, reassuring themselves with touch that they were both real, both whole. Finally, Kieran pulled back to look at her. "Any trouble?" Sarah smiled. "Some. Nothing I couldn't handle." Over dinner, she told him everything. The men who'd come in the night, her ride to the Lakota camp, the trap they'd set, the friendship she'd built with Wakian and Running Bear. Kieran listened with growing amazement. When she finished, he shook his head slowly. "You rode to Running Bear's camp alone, set a trap for 5 armed men, made alliances. I did what I had to do." "You did what a leader does," Kieran corrected. He took her hands. "Sarah, do you realize what you've done? You've created safety not just for us, but for everyone on this mountain. The Lakota trust us now. Trust you. That's extraordinary. I learned from the best, she said simply. That night, as they lay tangled together in bed, Kieran spoke into the darkness. I was terrified the whole time I was gone. Terrified something would happen to you, that I'd come back and you'd be hurt or worse. But you didn't need me to save you. You saved yourself. We save each other, Sarah said. That's what love is, isn't it? Not one person rescuing the other, but both people being strong enough to stand together. Together, Kieran echoed, pulling her closer. Always together. But their peace was about to be tested again. Wakian arrived at the cabin one crisp autumn morning, her horse lathered with sweat, her face tight with worry. Sarah was hanging herbs to dry when she heard the approach and immediately knew something was wrong. Wakian? What's happened? The younger woman dismounted quickly. My father. He's been arrested. Soldiers came 3 days ago. They say he stole cattle from a rancher named Dalton. They took him to Fort Reynolds. Sarah's blood ran cold. She knew that name, Dalton. He was a land grabber, a man who'd been trying to push the Lakota from their valley for years. And Fort Reynolds was notorious for its harsh treatment of native prisoners. That's impossible. Your father would never steal. I know, but Dalton has influence. He has papers that he claims prove ownership of the cattle found near our camp. My people are afraid. If my father is hanged... Wakian's voice broke. Sarah, I don't know what to do. Kieran emerged from the barn, taking in the scene immediately. What's going on? Sarah explained quickly, watching her husband's face darken with anger. Dalton's been trying to take that valley for years. Now he's found a way to do it. Frame Running Bear, get him hanged, and the Lakota will have to leave. We have to help, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Kieran nodded slowly. Fort Reynolds is a 4-day ride, and if we go accusing a prominent rancher of lying, he ran a hand through his hair. This could get ugly fast. I don't care, Sarah said fiercely. Running Bear helped me when I needed it. I won't abandon him now. Something shifted in Kieran's expression. Pride and love, and that deep recognition of finding someone who shared his values. Then we ride at dawn. But we do this smart. We need proof that Dalton's lying. They spent the evening planning. Wakian knew where Dalton's ranch was, knew his patterns. Kieran knew the fort's commanding officer from his cavalry days, a decent man named Colonel Morrison who valued justice over politics. If we can prove the cattle were Dalton's all along, that he moved them near the Lakota camp to frame Running Bear, Morrison will listen, Kieran said. That's a big if, Sarah pointed out. Then we better be convincing. They left before sunrise. Kieran, Sarah, and Wakian. Sarah had never ridden so hard or so long, but she gritted her teeth and kept pace. This was her friend's father. Her friend. And in the territories, you didn't abandon friends. Dalton's ranch sprawled across the valley like a cancer, its boundaries marked by barbed wire and warning signs. They approached carefully, using the cover of twilight. What they found confirmed their suspicions. In a distant corral, separated from the main herd, were 20 head of cattle. Each one bore a fresh brand. Dalton's mark burned over what had clearly been a different brand underneath. He rebranded them, Wakian breezed. He took cattle from somewhere else, changed the marks, then moved them near our camp. Can you prove it? Sarah asked Kieran. He studied the brands carefully. Those marks are less than a week old. Any rancher would see it. And look, he pointed to a few animals that still showed traces of the original brand. That's the triple bar mark. Sam Henderson's ranch, 30 miles south. I know Sam. He reported cattle stolen 2 months ago. So we go to Henderson, get him to identify his cattle, then take that evidence to the fort, Sarah said. But it wasn't that simple. As they were preparing to leave, they heard voices, Dalton and 3 of his men, approaching the corral. "Check those brands again," Dalton was saying. "Make sure none of the old marks are showing through. When the marshal comes to inspect, everything needs to be perfect." They hid in the shadows, barely breathing. Sarah's hand found the knife at her belt. Beside her, Kieran had his rifle ready, though she knew he wouldn't shoot unless absolutely necessary. They needed Dalton alive to testify. "Boss, what if someone figures it out?" one of the hands asked nervously. "That Injun didn't steal these cattle. We did." Dalton laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Who's gonna believe a savage over me? Running Bear will hang, his people will leave, and I'll have the whole valley. Nobody cares what happens to natives." "I care," Kieran said, stepping out of the shadows, his rifle leveled. "And so does Colonel Morrison. So do a lot of people." Dalton spun, his hand going for his gun. "Frost, should have known you'd stick your nose in this." "You're going to ride with us to Fort Reynolds," Kieran continued calmly. "You're going to tell the truth about what you've done. And if you're very lucky, they'll just throw you in prison instead of hanging you for theft and attempted murder." "Murder?" Dalton sneered. "I haven't killed anyone." "Not yet," Sarah said, emerging with her own rifle. "But hanging an innocent man? That's murder. And we have 3 witnesses who just heard you confess." The standoff lasted seconds, but felt like hours. Finally, Dalton's shoulders slumped. He knew he was caught. His men, seeing their boss give up, raised their hands in surrender. They bound Dalton and his men, then rode through the night to Sam Henderson's ranch. The old rancher confirmed the cattle were his, stolen 2 months prior. He agreed to ride with them to Fort Reynolds, eager to see justice done. By the time they reached the fort, they had Dalton's confession, Henderson's identification, and physical proof of the rebranding. Colonel Morrison listened to the whole story, his face growing darker with each detail. "Mr. Dalton," he said finally, his voice cold, "you've committed theft, fraud, and attempted murder through legal means. You'll be held here pending trial." Running Bear was released immediately. The reunion between father and daughter made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. The old warrior embraced Wakian, then turned to Sarah and Kieran. "I told you," he said, his eyes warm. "This is what friends do. You have saved my life. I will not forget." "We're family," Sarah said simply. "That's what families do." The ride home was slower, easier. Sarah felt Kieran watching her, and when they made camp that night, he pulled her into his arms. "You were magnificent," he said. "The way you stood up to Dalton, the way you fought for justice. You're becoming legendary in these mountains, Sarah Frost." She laughed. "I'm just doing what's right." "That's what makes you legendary." He kissed her softly. "I knew you were special that first night, but every day you show me new reasons to love you." "Good," Sarah said, nestling closer, "because I plan on giving you reasons for the rest of our lives." They arrived home to find a letter waiting, not from Emma this time, but from Murphy. There was going to be a territorial meeting, a gathering of all the settlements and groups in the region. They wanted Kieran to speak about cooperation between settlers and native peoples. "They want you too," Kieran said, reading further. "They've heard about what you did, about your friendship with the Lakota. They think you can bridge gaps, build understanding." Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. "Me speak in front of people?" You faced down 5 armed men. You rode into a Lakota camp alone. You helped free an innocent man from hanging. Kieran smiled. I think you can handle a speech. The meeting was held in Silver Creek, the largest settlement in the territory. Over 100 people gathered. Miners, ranchers, merchants, and representatives from 3 different native tribes, including Running Bear and Wakion. Sarah stood before them, Kieran's steadying presence beside her, and spoke from her heart. I came to this territory with nothing, she began. I was a widow, alone, scared. I thought I'd have to make myself small, make myself weak to survive. But I found something different here. I found strength in unexpected places. I found friendship across boundaries I thought couldn't be crossed. I found that the wilderness doesn't care about our divisions. It only cares whether we're strong enough to survive together. She told them about that first night with the men who'd threatened her, about riding to the Lakota camp, about the trust that had been built through simple acts of respect and mutual aid. We can keep fighting each other, she continued, keep stealing, suspecting, harming, and we'll all be weaker for it. Or we can do what Running Bear and I did, what Kieran and I do every day. We can choose to be family, to help each other, to build something lasting in this wild place. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Running Bear stood, raising his hand in respect. Others followed, settlers and natives both, acknowledging the truth in her words. It wasn't a perfect solution. Old hatreds didn't disappear overnight. But it was a beginning, a seed planted that might grow into something stronger. That night, back at the cabin, Sarah and Kieran sat on their porch watching the stars emerge. She was exhausted, her body aching from the hard riding and harder emotions of the past weeks. Are you all right? Kieran asked softly. I'm better than all right, Sarah said. I'm home, with you, building something that matters. She paused. I never thought I'd have this. After Tom died, after everything fell apart, I thought my life was over, that the best I could hope for was survival. And now I know survival isn't enough. I want to thrive. I want to build. I want to make this territory better for everyone, settler and native, men and women, anyone brave enough to try. Kieran pulled her close, his hand resting on her belly, where new life was beginning to grow. Then we'll do it together, he said. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Together, Sarah echoed. 2 months passed in relative peace. Sarah's pregnancy became obvious, her body changing to accommodate the life within. Kieran was alternately protective and amazed, his hands constantly drawn to her belly, feeling for the flutter of movement. Wakion visited often, bringing herbs and knowledge from her people's traditions. She and Sarah spent hours together, talking about motherhood, about life, about the future they were all building. But the wilderness had one more test for them. The winter came early and hard that year, snow falling in sheets that lasted days. Sarah was 8 months pregnant, moving slowly, her body heavy and awkward. Kieran stayed close, refusing to go more than a few hundred yards from the cabin. Then, on a night when the wind howled like a living thing, Sarah's water broke. It's too early, she gasped, gripping Kieran's arm. The baby's not supposed to come for another month. Kieran's face went pale, but his hands were steady. It's all right. We'll handle this. Together. But they both knew the truth. The nearest doctor was in Silver Creek, a 2-day ride in good weather. In this storm, it might as well be on the moon. And early babies were fragile, their chances uncertain. I need to get Wakian, Kieran said. She knows about birthing. She can help. You can't ride in this, Sarah protested through a contraction. You'll freeze to death before you reach the valley. Then I'll build the biggest fire they've ever seen. Signal them. Something. He cupped her face. I'm not losing you. I'm not losing our baby. Whatever it takes. 6 months later, Sarah stood in that same meadow, her hand on her slightly rounded belly, watching Kieran work with Shadow. The stallion was teaching a younger horse the mountain trails, patient as always. He built the fire on the ridge, feeding it every log he could carry, making it burn so bright it could be seen for miles. Then he stayed with Sarah, holding her hand, wiping her brow, talking her through each contraction with a calmness he didn't feel. You're doing so well, he murmured. So strong. Just breathe with me. That's it. Hours passed. The pain grew worse. Sarah gritted her teeth, trying not to scream, trying to be brave. But she was terrified. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She wasn't ready. The baby wasn't ready. Kieran, she gasped during a particularly brutal contraction. If something happens to me, nothing's happening to you, he said fiercely. You hear me? Nothing. But if it does, you have to take care of our baby. You have to. She cried out, the pain stealing her words. I'll die before I hurt you, Kieran said, and she heard the echo of words he'd spoken before. I'll die before I let you be hurt. Both of you are coming through this. I don't care what I have to do. The door burst open, snow swirling in with Wakian and Running Bear. They'd seen the fire, fought through the storm, understanding the desperation that would make someone build a beacon in a blizzard. Thank God, Kieran breathed. Wakian took over immediately, her hands gentle but sure as she examined Sarah. Her face was grave. The baby is early, small. This will be difficult. Can you save them? Kieran asked, his voice breaking. Both of them? I will try. But you must be strong for her now. She needs your strength. The labor lasted through the night and into the next day. Sarah faded in and out, exhausted beyond measure. Her body pushed past what she thought it could endure. Kieran never left her side, his voice a constant anchor, reminding her why she had to fight. Think about holding our baby, he said. Think about watching them grow, teaching them to ride Shadow, showing them the mountains. Our family, Sarah. Our life together. Fight for it. Fight for us. And she did. Through the pain and the fear and the exhaustion, she fought. When Wakian told her to push, she pushed with everything she had. When her body screamed for rest, she found the strength to continue. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, a thin cry pierced the air. A girl, Wakian said, wrapping the tiny baby in warm blankets. Small, but alive, strong lungs. Sarah sobbed with relief as Kieran placed their daughter in her arms. The baby was impossibly small, her skin red and wrinkled, her fingers like twigs, but she was alive. She was theirs. Hope, Sarah whispered, looking up at Kieran with tears streaming down her face. We should name her Hope. Kieran kissed Sarah's forehead, his own tears falling freely. Hope, he agreed, because that's what you gave me, what you give everyone who knows you. But the danger wasn't over. Baby Hope was too early, too small. She couldn't keep warm, couldn't nurse properly. Wakian stayed for days, showing Sarah how to keep the baby's temperature up, how to feed her tiny drops of milk, how to watch for signs of distress. She's a fighter, Wakian said on the third day, like her mother. Slowly, impossibly, Hope began to thrive. She gained weight. Her color improved, her cries grew stronger, and with each tiny victory, Sarah felt her own strength returning. Running Bear visited often those first weeks, bringing gifts for the baby. A beaded blanket, a tiny pair of soft leather moccasins. "She will be a bridge," he said, looking at Hope with wonder. "Between our peoples, between the old ways and the new. She is blessed." 3 months later, Hope was thriving. She was still small but growing, her eyes bright and curious, her grip surprisingly strong when she wrapped her tiny fingers around Kieran's. Sarah watched her husband with their daughter and fell in love with him all over again. He was so gentle with Hope, so patient. This massive man who could fight bears and outlaws would spend hours just holding their daughter, singing to her in a surprisingly soft voice. Emma's letter said they'd be here in the spring. Kieran nodded, but Sarah saw the fear in his eyes. What if Grace didn't remember him? What if she resented him for not fighting harder to keep Emma? What if she hated the mountain, hated this life? "It'll be all right," Sarah promised. "You'll see." Spring came with a rush of green and birdsong. The snow melted, revealing wildflowers that carpeted the meadow in purple and gold. And on a warm April morning, 2 riders appeared on the trail, a woman and a girl. Emma looked older than her years, her face lined with experiences Sarah could only guess at. But she smiled when she saw Kieran, a genuine smile without bitterness. "Kieran," she said, dismounting, "you look well." "Emma." He helped her down, then turned to the girl, Grace. She was 9 now, tall for her age, with Kieran's gray eyes and Emma's delicate features. "Hi, Papa," she said shyly. Kieran's face crumbled. He dropped to his knees in front of her, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Grace, my God, look at you. You're so grown up." "Don't cry, Papa," Grace said, but she was crying too. "I missed you. I missed you too, baby girl, every single day." They embraced, and Sarah had to turn away, her own tears falling. Emma touched her shoulder gently. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for loving him, for making him happy again." "He makes me happy too," Sarah said. The visit was better than any of them had hoped. Grace was enchanted by the mountain, by Shadow, by her baby sister Hope. She followed Kieran everywhere, hungry for time with him, asking a million questions about his life, his work, the wilderness. "Can I come back?" she asked on their last night. "Maybe stay for the whole summer?" Kieran looked at Emma, hope and fear warring in his expression. Emma smiled. "If you want to," she said to Grace. "If your papa wants you to." "Want you to?" Kieran's voice broke. "Grace, I'd love nothing more. This is your home too. Always will be." Sarah watched this reunion with a full heart. Her family was growing. Not just Hope, but Grace too. And Emma, who could have been an enemy, but chose to be a friend. That night, after Emma and Grace had gone to bed in the guest room, Sarah and Kieran sat on the porch, Hope sleeping between them in her cradle. "A year ago, I was alone," Sarah said softly. "Desperate, ready to trade my last possession for a meal. And now look at us. We have a home, a daughter, friends, family. How did we get so lucky?" "Luck had nothing to do with it," Kieran said. "You fought for this, for us. You were brave when I was afraid, strong when I was weak. You built this life as much as I did. More, maybe. We built it together," Sarah corrected. "That's what makes it strong." The following weeks passed in a blur of joy. Grace threw herself into mountain life, learning to track with Kieran, to shoot with Sarah, to ride Shadow with the confidence of someone born to it. Wakian visited often, teaching both girls beadwork and stories of her people. Emma stayed longer than planned, finding her own peace in the mountains' quiet. One evening, she and Sarah sat together while the others were down by the stream. "I was wrong," Emma said quietly, "to leave him, to take Grace away. I thought I needed civilization, society, all those things. But really, I just needed to be brave enough to live differently." "It's not too late," Sarah said, "to find what you need." "No," Emma agreed, "and I have. In Denver, I have a good life there, a man who's kind to me, work I enjoy. But I'm grateful Kieran has this, has you. You're what he needed all along, someone as strong as he is." When Emma and Grace finally left, promising to return, the mountain felt both emptier and fuller. Emptier without their presence, but fuller with the promise of continued connection. Summer turned to fall, fall to winter. Hope grew from an infant to a toddler, her first steps taken in the meadow where Sarah and Kieran had married. Her first word was Dada, which made Kieran cry again. Her second word was Shadow, which made everyone laugh. Wakian met a young warrior from another tribe and married in a beautiful ceremony that blended traditions. Sarah and Kieran stood as witnesses. Hope held between them, part of a family that transcended blood and culture. Running Bear grew older, but no less vital, his wisdom sought by settlers and natives alike. The territorial meetings continued, and slowly, painfully, the different peoples learned to coexist. Not perfectly. There were still conflicts, still prejudices, but better, always better. Sarah's role in this peace didn't go unnoticed. People began coming to her with disputes, trusting her fairness, her ability to see all sides. She became a mediator, a bridge. Exactly what Running Bear had predicted Hope would be. But Sarah was that bridge first. One evening, 2 years after Hope's birth, Sarah sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of fire. Kieran came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we've come," she said. "How different life is from what I thought it would be." "Better or worse?" "So much better. Better than I dreamed possible." She turned in his arms. "I love you, Kieran Frost, more every day." "And I love you," he said, kissing her softly. "My brave, beautiful, impossible wife." From inside, they heard Hope's giggle and Shadow's answering whinny. The horse had learned to stick his head through the window to visit his favorite tiny human. "Our family's growing," Sarah said, and there was a meaning in her words that made Kieran pull back to look at her. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying Hope's going to be a big sister. Come next spring." Kieran's whoop of joy could probably be heard in 3 territories. He picked Sarah up and spun her around, then set her down carefully, his hands immediately going to her belly. "Another baby," he breathed. "Another miracle." "Our life is the miracle," Sarah corrected. "Everything else is just a gift." The next spring came with new life in every form. Sarah gave birth to a son, easier this time, faster, with Wakian and even Emma, who'd come to help, at her side. They named him Thomas, after Sarah's first husband, because Kieran insisted. "He was part of your journey," Kieran said. "Part of what made you who you are. Our son should carry that honor." Grace spent the entire summer with them, bonding with her siblings, growing stronger and wilder and happier with each day. She brought books from Denver, and taught Hope her letters. She helped Kieran with the horses and Sarah with the garden. She was, in every way that mattered, home. The cabin expanded, more rooms added, more space for their growing family. Running Bear's people helped with the building, and in return, Kieran and Sarah helped them when soldiers threatened their water rights. Years passed. Hope grew into a fierce, bright girl who could outride most of the boys in the territory and outthink most of the adults. Thomas became a quiet, thoughtful child who loved books as much as he loved the wilderness. Grace visited every summer, bringing stories from Denver and Denver's ways, teaching her siblings that the world was bigger than one mountain. More children came, twin girls that Kieran delivered himself during a sudden storm, a boy born under a full moon that Running Bear said was blessed by the spirits. Each child was loved fiercely, raised to be strong and kind and brave. Sarah's role as mediator grew. She traveled to different settlements, helping resolve disputes, building networks of cooperation. Kieran always went with her. The two of them, a team that people trusted implicitly. The territory changed around them. More settlers came. Towns grew. Railways were discussed. But through it all, the mountains remained, and Sarah and Kieran remained, adapting to change while holding fast to what mattered. On their 10th anniversary, they stood in the meadow where they'd married, surrounded by their children, their friends, their community. "Thank you," Sarah said to Kieran, "for seeing me that first night, for offering me not just survival, but a life." "Thank you," Kieran countered, "for teaching me that being strong doesn't mean being alone, that love isn't weakness, but the greatest strength of all." They kissed while their children made exaggerated gagging sounds and their friends cheered. Shadow whinnied approval. The sun set over the mountains in glory, and Sarah thought back to that desperate woman in Murphy's trading post, ready to trade her last ring for food. She thought about how close she'd come to giving up, to accepting less than she deserved. She thought about Kieran saying, "Gold isn't what we need here." He'd been right. Gold wasn't what they needed. They needed each other, needed bravery and love and the willingness to build something new in the wilderness. They'd found it, built it, lived it, and they would continue living it together for all the years to come. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Kieran and Sarah's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.